strange how one small mistake, one careless slip, can change everything. I'd always thought my wife and I had the kind of relationship where nothing could come between us. Trust, loyalty, respect. These were the foundations we built our lives on. I was wrong. It all came crashing down the day her affair partner made one tiny, careless mistake. It started out as any other day. I was sorting through my emails when I noticed a message that didn't quite fit. It was from a name I didn't recognize, someone named Alex. It was strange because it was sent to my work email. Curiosity got the better of me, so I opened it. What I saw left me frozen. The email wasn't meant for me at all. It was clearly directed to her. My heart began to pound as I read through each line, seeing phrases like, "Last night was amazing," and "Can't wait to see you again." Then it got worse. Right at the end of the email was something that would shatter my trust forever. A line that said, "Be careful, he might find out." That was it. My suspicions, the things I'd ignored, the odd behavior I'd brushed off, they all rushed back at once. Every late night, every unexplained call, every time she'd shrugged off my questions. All of it was in that one careless sentence, a warning from him to her that he never expected I'd see. I closed the email, feeling the weight of betrayal settle over me like a heavy fog. Shock, disbelief, the anger, couldn't process any of it, not all at once. It just sat there, numb, as the reality of it sank in. The woman I'd loved, the woman I'd trusted more than anyone, had been lying to me all along. After finding that email, everything changed. My world, my view of her, even the way I looked at myself, it was all thrown into chaos. I sat there, staring at the screen, rereading the message until the words lost their meaning. The pain and anger stayed sharp. That one line, "Careful, you might find out," echoed in my mind. It was almost insulting, as if I were some clueless fool they could manipulate. I'd never felt so disrespected, so deceived. I spent the rest of the day going through the motions, pretending nothing was wrong. But every time I thought about her, every time I replayed the conversations we'd had over the last few months, things that seemed so ordinary suddenly felt like pieces of a puzzle I'd been too blind to see. Couldn't help but think back to all the little signs I'd ignored. It was almost embarrassing, realizing how many times I'd trusted her, how many excuses I'd let slide. Each memory brought a new wave of anger, and the feeling that I'd let her make a fool out of me grew stronger. That night, when she got home, I tried to act normal. She walked in with her usual smile, kissed me on the cheek, and asked how my day was. But all I could think about was that email. Her affair partner's words felt like poison in my mind, tainting every word she said. I gave her short answers, barely looking at her, afraid that if I met her eyes, I'd lose control. She didn't seem to notice, or maybe she was just too confident, too comfortable in her deception. It made me sick. Over the next few days, I started to watch her more closely. I tried to act like everything was fine, but inside, I was unraveling, piecing together every interaction, every business trip she'd taken, every night she'd come home late with some weak excuse. As I watched, I began to see more signs, things I'd been blind to before. Phone was always within reach, never left unattended. She'd get texts late at night, messages that she'd brush off as work, quickly hiding her phone whenever I walked into the room. One night, couldn't take it anymore. I was lying next to her, staring at the ceiling, wondering how she could pretend so easily. Calmness on her face, the way she breathed peacefully while I was being torn apart by suspicion and anger, was infuriating. I decided then and there that I needed to know the truth. All of it. Couldn't live in this half-reality any longer. I needed proof, something undeniable that would finally expose everything. Following day, I started digging. I knew I'd find something if I looked hard enough. Sure enough, the more I searched, the more I found. I went through her emails, her messages, looking for anything that could confirm what I'd already suspected. Most of it was carefully hidden, deleted texts, conversations moved to private apps. There were still traces, pieces of conversations, random bits of information, things that didn't make sense unless you knew what to look for. And then I found it. Text she'd forgotten to delete. Just a few words, but enough to confirm everything. "I'll meet you at the usual place." I knew exactly what that meant. I'd seen it too many times in movies, heard too many stories. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore, so confident that I'd never find out. The anger simmered just beneath the surface, and I felt a growing need to confront her, make her face what she'd done. Something held me back. It wasn't enough to have a few messages, a few vague lines. I needed her to admit it to see the guilt in her eyes when she finally realized I knew everything. I couldn't let her keep up the lie. Couldn't let her walk away without facing the reality of what she'd done. So I waited. I watched her even more closely. Noted every time she slipped out with some flimsy excuse. Every meeting that didn't add up. I began to time her comings and goings, tracking the places she went, the names she used. It felt almost surreal, like I was living someone else's life, like I'd become a detective in my own marriage, piecing together clues that had been there all along. Then, one day, she made a mistake. She left her phone unlocked on the kitchen counter, just for a moment. I don't think she realized I was watching. She was distracted, rushing out the door, and I seized the chance, picked up the phone, heart pounding, and scrolled through her messages. And there it was, a string of texts between her and him, laid out in black and white. Plans they'd made, secret meetings, even details about when she'd be free to see him. It was all there, plain as day, like a slap in the face. I felt a wave of nausea, my hands shaking as I read through each line. I couldn't believe it, even though I'd already known. Seeing it, having undeniable proof in front of me, was like a punch to the gut. She hadn't just lied to me. She'd built an entire world behind my back. Life where I didn't exist, where I was just a shadow, a fool she could string along without a second thought. Messages told a story that went back months. Every excuse, every late night, every business trip, had all been for him. And the worst part? She was completely unashamed, casually discussing their plans, laughing at things I had no idea about, like I was some distant memory. It was disgusting, humiliating, and I felt my anger grow with every word I read. When she came home that night, I was ready. I had the text saved, every line burned into my memory, and I knew there was no way she could deny it now. But as she walked through the door, gave me that same sweet smile, I realized something. I didn't want to confront her. Not yet. I wanted her to keep going, keep up the charade, thinking I was still clueless, still the trusting husband she could deceive so easily. I played along, let her think I was still in the dark. I'd smile, ask about her day, pretend like everything was fine, and each time she lied to my face, it was like adding fuel to the fire inside me. She had no idea that her perfect little world was on the verge of collapse. The truth was waiting, just under the surface, ready to tear apart every lie she'd so carefully constructed. But I knew I couldn't keep it up forever. Couldn't let her keep playing me. Couldn't let her think she'd won. So I began planning. I'd catch her in the act, leave her no room to deny it, no chance to twist the truth. I'd make her see the depth of her betrayal, make her face the reality of what she'd done. When that moment came, I'd be ready. This wasn't just about revenge or anger anymore. It was about reclaiming my life, about refusing to let her lies define me. She'd taken so much already, stolen pieces of me I'd never get back. I wouldn't let her keep taking. Not anymore. I'd give her one last chance to come clean, to face the truth, and then I'd walk away. Free, stronger, and with the knowledge that I was finally done being her fool. I couldn't shake the rage building inside me. Day after day, she walked around acting as if everything was normal, like she hadn't been lying to me for months. Each time she smiled, every casual "good morning" or "how was your day" only made me angrier. She had no idea I'd seen everything, knew everything, that I was just waiting for the perfect moment to confront her. Part of me knew I needed her to slip up one more time, give me an undeniable, in-the-moment admission of her betrayal. And soon, that moment came. One night, she told me she'd be working late, that she'd be gone for hours, and that I shouldn't wait up. Voice was casual, almost dismissive, as if I'd become a background character in her life. I watched her leave, waited until I was sure she was gone, and then grabbed my keys. I was done watching from the sidelines. Tonight, I was going to get my answers. I'd been keeping track of her messages, piecing together bits of her schedule based on the texts she thought I'd never see. I knew the place they met, the times she'd sneak off, the excuses she used. She had a routine, one that hadn't changed in months. And tonight, she was walking right into her own trap. As I parked a few blocks away, I felt my pulse quicken, a mixture of anger and nerves. I wasn't sure what I'd find, wasn't sure how far things had gone. The need to know, to finally face her with the truth, drove me forward. Walked toward the cafe they met at, careful to keep out of sight. And there she was, sitting across from him, her face lit up with the kind of smile I hadn't seen in years. Felt like a slap. Watching her laugh, seeing the way she looked at him, it was like I was staring at a stranger. She'd always reserved that look for me, or so I'd thought. Now, it was clear she'd given it to someone else, as if I'd never meant anything to her. We were close, leaning in toward each other, sharing small touches, quiet whispers. Scene felt surreal, like I'd stumbled into someone else's life. I wanted to barge in, demand an explanation, make her see the hurt she'd caused. I held back, watching as she reached across the table, touched his hand, laughed at something he'd said. It was like watching a movie, painful, twisted version of my life playing out in front of me. Then he slipped up. As they got up to leave, he reached into his pocket and handed her something. Small, wrapped gift. Couldn't hear their conversation, but I saw her eyes light up, saw the way she smiled, tucked it into her bag. It was so intimate, so casual, like it was their normal. Like I was the outsider. In his excitement, he'd left something behind. Small piece of paper slipped out of his pocket, falling unnoticed to the ground as they walked away. I watched them go, heart pounding, barely breathing. And once they were out of sight, I picked up the paper, unfolding it to reveal a string of messages, printed out, conversations between them, messages I'd never seen. Details were all there, dates, places, things they'd done. It was so carefully documented, as if he was trying to preserve every moment of their affair. I felt a sick sense of satisfaction as I read through each line, each declaration of love, each plan they'd made behind my back. It was all the proof I needed, all the ammunition I'd been waiting for. I took a photo of it, saved every line, every detail, and put the paper back exactly where he'd left it. He wouldn't even realize it was gone, wouldn't suspect that I knew. And tonight, I'd confront her with everything, leave her no room for denial. Back home, I waited. The hours felt endless, every minute stretching out as I prepared myself for the confrontation. My mind was racing, filled with anger, betrayal, and a twisted sense of satisfaction. I was ready to see her face, ready to watch her crumble under the weight of her own lies. When she finally walked through the door, she gave me the same tired smile, told me she'd had a long night at work. I nodded, calm, silent, and watched as she put her things down, as if she hadn't just betrayed everything we'd ever shared. I waited, let her settle in, let her think she'd gotten away with it. And then I spoke. I know where you were tonight. She froze, her face going pale, her eyes wide with shock. For a moment, she looked like she'd seen a ghost, like her world was collapsing around her. She quickly recovered, forcing a smile, trying to brush it off. What are you talking about? She said, her voice light, casual. There was an edge to it, nervousness that hadn't been there before. I followed you, I said, my voice steady, calm. I saw you with him. I saw everything. Color drained from her face, and she opened her mouth, searching for words, but nothing came out. I waited, letting the silence grow, letting her feel the weight of the truth. Finally, she stammered. It's not what you think. He's just a friend. I laughed, a cold, bitter sound that felt foreign in my own ears. Friend, I repeated, shaking my head. Friend you meet in secret? Friend who writes you love letters? Don't insult me. She looked away, her face flushed, her hands fidgeting. I didn't let up. Saw the messages, I said, my voice hard, unyielding. Plans, promises, everything. You lied to me. She tried to deny it, tried to explain, to twist the truth. Her words were hollow, empty. And as she spoke, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. I didn't need her excuses, didn't need her lies. I'd seen enough. The woman standing in front of me wasn't the person I'd thought I'd married. She was a stranger, someone who'd taken my trust, my love, and thrown it away without a second thought. I stood there, watching her struggle, watching her try to piece together an explanation. I didn't care anymore. The love I'd once felt, the trust I'd given her, was gone, replaced by something colder, harder. It moved past the need for answers, for closure. All I wanted was to be free from her lies, free from the weight of her betrayal. I want you out, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Pack your things and leave. She looked at me, her eyes wide, pleading, but I held her gaze, unflinching. There was no forgiveness left, no second chances. She'd taken everything we'd built, everything I'd held dear, destroyed it. And now it was time for her to face the consequences. She tried to argue, tried to beg, but I was done listening. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there alone with the reality of what she'd done. I didn't look back, didn't give her the satisfaction of a goodbye. This was her ending, not mine. As I walked out of the room, a strange sense of freedom washed over me. Pain, the anger, was still there, but it didn't control me anymore. I was finally free from her lies, from the weight of her betrayal. And as I stepped into the quiet of the night, I knew one thing for certain. I'd never look back. After she left, the house felt like a hollow shell. I thought I'd feel a sense of peace, some kind of relief at finally cutting her out of my life, but instead it felt strangely empty. Silence was almost oppressive, constant reminder of the life we built that was now in ruins. Her things were gone, her presence erased, the memories lingered, each one sharper than the last. I was free from her lies, but I hadn't yet escaped pain. First few days were a blur. I went through the motions, doing my best to keep up appearances at work, stay composed around friends and family. But inside, I was anything but okay. I couldn't stop thinking about everything I'd seen, everything I'd uncovered. It was like an endless loop in my mind, replaying every moment of betrayal, every lie she'd told. I'd trusted her completely. She'd taken that trust and shattered it without a second thought. The weight of it was suffocating. Nights were the worst. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with questions that would never have answers. Was any of it real? Had she ever truly loved me? Or was it all just a game, facade she'd kept up until something better came along? The uncertainty was maddening, the idea that I might never know the truth haunting me long after she was gone. Kept trying to make sense of it, find some reason, some explanation for why she'd done what she did. But no matter how much I thought about it, the answers remained out of reach. As the days turned into weeks, the anger began to settle, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. It was a grief, not for her, for the life I thought we'd had. Dreams we'd shared, the future we'd planned, it was all gone. Ripped away by her betrayal. I found myself avoiding the places we used to go, the things we used to do. Even the smallest reminders felt like daggers, reopening wounds that had barely begun to heal. I started questioning everything, not just about her, but about myself. How had I missed the signs? Had I been too trusting, too blind to see the truth? It was a painful realization, knowing that I'd allowed myself to be deceived, that I'd been so willing to believe her lies. I thought I was strong, that I was someone who could see through deception. She'd fooled me completely. Doubt crept in, casting shadows over my sense of self, making me question my own worth, my own judgment. Friends and family noticed the change in me. They reached out, offered words of comfort, tried to get me to open up. I couldn't bring myself to talk about it, to relive the pain all over again. I wanted to keep it private, deal with it on my own terms. The thought of explaining it, of letting others see the hurt she'd caused, felt too raw, too vulnerable. So I kept it to myself, wearing a mask of indifference, pretending like I was fine when, in reality, I was anything but. But as time went on, something began to shift. The initial shock, the overwhelming pain, began to fade, replaced by a quiet determination. I realized that I couldn't keep living in the shadow of her betrayal, couldn't let her lies define me. She'd taken enough from me already, stolen enough of my happiness, my peace. It was time to take back control, rebuild my life on my own terms. Started small, making changes around the house, moving the last remnants of her presence. I took down photos, cleared out the things she'd left behind, rearranged furniture to make the space feel like mine again. Each small act felt like a step forward, a way of reclaiming my life, my identity. I began to see the house not as a place filled with memories of her, but as a blank canvas, space I could fill with new experiences, new memories that were truly mine. The process was slow. With each passing day, I felt a little stronger, a little more whole. Started going out again, reconnecting with old friends, spending time with people who reminded me of who I was before her lies had twisted everything. It brought a sense of normalcy, a reminder that there was life beyond the pain, that I could find happiness again, even if it took time. Eventually, I realized that holding on to the anger, bitterness, was only hurting me. It was like a poison, something that ate away at me from the inside. Didn't want to be defined by her betrayal. Didn't want to carry that weight with me into the future. So I made the choice to let go. Not for her, for me. She didn't deserve my forgiveness, but I deserved peace. I deserved to be free from the hurt she'd caused. Letting go was easier said than done, but with time, I found a way. I stopped replaying the memories, stopped dwelling on the questions, had no answers. I began to focus on myself, on the things I wanted, the goals I'd set aside. I took up new hobbies, tried things I'd always wanted to do but had put off for her sake. I discovered parts of myself I'd forgotten, parts that had been buried under the weight of our relationship. I realized that I didn't need her, didn't need anyone else to complete me. I was enough on my own, capable of building a life that was full and meaningful without her lies hanging over me. The realization was liberating. The weight lifted from my shoulders. I no longer felt like a victim of her betrayal. I felt like a survivor, someone who had been through hell and come out the other side stronger. In the months that followed, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. I set new goals, made new plans, and slowly but surely, I began to see a future that was mine. A future that was filled with hope and possibility. Scars were still there, reminders of the pain I'd endured, but they no longer defined me. They were just marks of a past I'd left behind, lessons I'd learned the hard way. People would ask if I'd forgiven her, if I'd moved on. The truth was, I had. Not for her sake, for my own. Holding on to the anger, the resentment, only kept me chained to the past, kept me from fully embracing the life I was building. I'd come to see her as just a part of my story, chapter I'd closed, lesson learned. I didn't need to hold on to the hurt anymore. I was free. Looking back, I'm grateful, not for the betrayal, for the strength it revealed in me. I learned that I could survive, that I could rebuild, that I could find happiness even after the worst kind of heartbreak. Her lies, her betrayal, they no longer held power over me. I was finally free to live, to love, to find joy in the simple things. And as I move forward, I know one thing for certain. I am enough. I am strong, resilient, capable of facing whatever life throws my way. Her betrayal may have broken me for a time, but it didn't define me. I am more than the hurt she caused, more than the lies she told. I am whole, and I am ready for whatever comes next. Time moved forward, slowly at first, like I was wading through thick mud. Each day felt like a struggle, but with every sunrise, I could feel something inside me shifting, growing. The initial shock of betrayal had long since worn off, and what remained was a steady, simmering determination to rebuild, to reclaim the pieces of myself I'd lost along the way. It was as if I was emerging from a fog, each day becoming a little clearer, a little brighter. In those early days, it was the small things that helped me the most. I rearranged the furniture, moved around the things she'd left behind, changed the layout of the rooms. It may have seemed like nothing, but these changes were more than just decor. They were the first steps in creating a space that felt like mine, a home that wasn't haunted by memories of her. Each piece I moved, each item I replaced, felt like taking back a part of myself, my life. Friends and family noticed the difference too. They'd been supportive from the beginning, offering words of encouragement, checking in on me when the days were darkest. Now, they started to see a new side of me, strength that had been forged through the pain. They'd tell me I seemed lighter, more confident, like a weight had been lifted. And they were right. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. But freedom didn't come without its challenges. Letting go wasn't easy. There were still nights when I'd lie awake, the echoes of the past creeping in, questions swirling in my mind. Why did she do it? Had anything we shared ever been real? These thoughts would twist and turn, nagging at the edges of my mind, refusing to let go. I'd replay moments we'd shared, things she'd said, trying to find the cracks, clues I'd missed. And while these questions never truly disappeared, they began to lose their power over me. The hold they had on me weakened, replaced by a new understanding that some answers would never come, and that was okay. I realized that moving on didn't mean forgetting. It meant accepting what had happened, acknowledging the hurt, and choosing to let it shape me rather than define me. I learned to carry the scars, not as marks of shame, but as reminders of my strength, of everything I'd survived. I knew now that I was more resilient than I'd ever thought possible, that I had faced betrayal and heartbreak head-on and come out the other side. I began setting new goals, ones that were just for me. Travel was something I'd always dreamed of, places I'd wanted to see but had put off. She and I had made plans, talked about seeing the world together. They'd just been empty promises. Now I was free to make those plans a reality, on my own terms. I started researching destinations, booking flights, creating itineraries. It was thrilling, the idea of exploring new places, meeting new people, creating memories that were mine alone. The first trip I took was a simple one, just a weekend getaway to a nearby city. It felt like a world away, walking through unfamiliar streets, tasting new foods, seeing sights I'd only read about. It was like a breath of fresh air. I didn't have to worry about anyone else, didn't have to answer to anyone. I was free to do as I pleased, to experience the world with my own eyes, unfiltered by the expectations of someone else. As I traveled, I found myself rediscovering parts of myself I'd forgotten. I'd always loved trying new things, taking risks, pushing myself out of my comfort zone. Somewhere along the way, I'd lost that part of myself. buried it under the routines and compromises of our relationship. Now, that part of me was coming back to life, stronger than ever. I felt a sense of excitement, curiosity for the world around me that I hadn't felt in years. Coming home after each trip, I felt renewed, like I was slowly piecing myself back together. House, once a place filled with painful memories, was now a sanctuary, a space that reflected the person I was becoming. I filled it with things that brought me joy, surrounded myself with reminders of the places I'd been, things I'd seen. Each item, each memory was a testament to my resilience, the life I was building for myself. Over time, I began to see her betrayal not as a tragedy, but as a turning point. It was a painful lesson, yes, one that had forced me to confront parts of myself I'd ignored, parts that needed healing. I realized that I'd been too willing to compromise, too quick to ignore my own needs for the sake of someone else's happiness. Her lies, her deceit, they were symptoms of a larger problem that lay within me as much as within her. I allowed myself to be blind, to trust without question, to give without expecting anything in return. While that wasn't a flaw, it was a lesson I'd needed to learn. As the months went by, I found myself letting go of the anger, resentment. Holding on to those feelings was like carrying a weight, one that only held me back. Didn't need to forgive her, didn't need to justify her actions, but I did need to forgive myself. I needed to let go of the guilt, shame, feeling that I'd somehow failed, because I hadn't. I'd been true to myself, true to my values, and in the end, that was what mattered most. Eventually, I started opening up again, letting people into my life in ways I hadn't since the betrayal. I rekindled old friendships, made new connections, allowed myself to be vulnerable. It wasn't easy. The walls I'd built around myself were strong, a defense mechanism against the hurt. Little by little, I began to let them down, trust again, to believe that not everyone was like her. There were people in the world who valued honesty, loyalty, love. One night, I found myself looking out at the city lights, reflecting on everything that had happened, everything I'd been through. And in that quiet moment, I felt a profound sense of peace. I realized that I was okay, that I was more than okay. I'd survived something that had nearly broken me, and I'd come out stronger, wiser. Scars were still there. They no longer held power over me. They were just reminders of a past I'd left behind. A past that had taught me more than I could have ever imagined. People often asked if I'd forgiven her, if I'd moved on. And the answer was simple. Yes, I'd moved on, not because of her, but in spite of her. Forgiveness wasn't for her. It was for me. I chose to let go of the anger, the resentment, because I didn't want to be weighed down by the past. I wanted to be free, to live a life that was full and meaningful. A life that was defined by my own choices, my own happiness. In the end, I realized that her betrayal had given me a gift, chance to rebuild, start anew, create a life that was truly mine. It had forced me to confront my own vulnerabilities, strengthen the parts of myself that had been weak. Now, standing on the other side, I knew that I was ready for whatever came next. The future was a blank slate, canvas waiting to be filled. I didn't know what lay ahead, didn't have all the answers, but I was okay with that. I was excited, hopeful, ready to embrace the unknown with open arms. Pain, hurt, the anger, they were all behind me now, fading into the distance as I looked forward to the life I was building. This was my story, my journey, and I was proud of it. Proud of the strength I'd found, the resilience I'd built. I was ready to love again, to trust, open my heart to the possibilities of the future. I knew that whatever happened, I'd be okay. Because I was whole, complete, strong in a way I hadn't been before. So here I am, moving forward, one step at a time, embracing the life that's waiting for me. This is my new beginning, my chance to create something beautiful out of the ashes, and I'm ready for it. If this story resonated with you, and you're interested in hearing more tales of resilience and new beginnings, hit subscribe and join us for the next chapter. Let's keep moving forward together.